Um, I am so excited to have Eileen Kerlin Walsh here today as my guest. She is one of my extremely favorite people in the entire planet. I just like Eileen, I just adore you. I love everything that you do. You have such a kind, giving heart, and I especially can't wait for them to hear you start speaking. So
No. Thank you, Jean. Thank
wait,
you.
so are you here? Let's do this. I think so we can make there we go.
Lovely.
There, now we're
Yeah.
right there. So
Mhm.
I'm so excited to have her here today. I want to tell you a little bit about Eileen, and I just have to find my notes here. So Eileen grew up on a small farm in Ireland. She came to the US in 1989 and fell in love with Chicago and the American dream. It gives me goosebumps. She began her legal career with the Will County and Cook County public defender's offices before establishing her own estate planning practice in 2002. Eileen is dedicated to drafting wills and trusts with warmth and competence. After years of consulting with clients in her office, their homes, and hospital rooms, she's discovered that no area of law is more important or more rewarding. In addition to helping her clients protect their assets and loved ones, as well as plan for the future, Eileen is an award-winning and nationally recognized speaker and author. Topics include business success, personal growth, estate planning, and storytelling, right?
Indeed.
So, Eileen,
Indeed.
welcome to Milk Crate Business Moments.
Oh, I'm delighted to be here with you, Jean. Absolutely delighted. And I love the title of your podcast. I love the milk crate moments.
So, well, let's start there. So, what milk? You know what Milk Crate Moments are? We've talked about that before, and I think it'll be apparent as we start going into this. So, tell me or share with me and everybody, what was your Milk Crate moment, or one of them, because every entrepreneur has many.
Yes, Jean. So a little bit of background. So as you said, I started my own practice, and that was in the early 2000s. My husband also started his business in the early 2000s. We were steeped in real estate and we were flying high. We had our small children, and it just seemed that we couldn't do anything wrong. And then the economic downturn and the fall of the housing market occurred, and it feels to me that it just happened overnight, and it was devastating for us. I had so many real estate clients. I had builders as clients. My husband was a builder. We had unsold properties. We had lots and loans and bills, and just it seemed that there was going to be no way to go forward. It just seemed that the rug was completely pulled out from the both of us. So that was really, really hard. And when we got through that, Jean, when we got through that, we've often said we can get through everything. But it was how did we get through? That really was, those were the lessons learned. And actually, in the business perspective, I did estate planning and real estate. And the real estate was probably my principal area of practice at that time, because if you remember the early 2000s, my builders would have a list of 30 people waiting for homes. It was so hot. But I also did some estate planning, because one of the offices that I worked for after the public defenders did wills, and nobody in the office wanted to do wills, but I loved the little old ladies. I loved sitting with them and doing their wills. So I had learned the basics of that practice, and it was part of my practice when I set up my own business. But a strange thing started to happen as all the real estate fell away, and there was a lot of fear and shakiness in the market. People became more concerned with wills and trusts. They were afraid of what was happening. They were concerned with protecting their assets, and the estate planning grew and grew and grew and blossomed. And from that concrete moment, from not knowing if we were even going to be able to keep the roof over our heads, not talk for businesses, my business began to flourish, my estate planning business. And my husband and I often joke that he was so busy building in the early 2000s that he hardly saw our youngest two. And then my estate planning business flourished. And I hardly saw those two, because while the real estate market shakily and slowly came back, I had really built this very, very successful estate planning practice. So the lesson was pivoting. It was finding the jewel, like what phoenix could arise from the ashes. And then just on a very personal level too, I just often felt that my heart was going to burst, that I was going to have a nervous breakdown. I wondered, and I really turned all my life, and certainly since my 20s, I've loved self-help. I've loved personal growth. I've reached for resources, no matter what I was going through. And I loved Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now. I would listen to that on audio. I would listen to his German voice saying that even if you were on death row, you could harness the power of now, and you could not worry about what was happening in the next day or the next week or the next year. So I think when I walked through that and realized I could get through it, and one of the things I would say to myself is, what is the worst that can happen? To lose all your savings, to lose your business, to maybe lose your beautiful home. And then what? And then Tom and I would say, we'll still have each other. We'll still have the boys. So we knew that we could start over again. And then from knowing that I had the personal fortitude in my relationship too, there was a point that Tom and I were lying in bed, and I know this is very, very vulnerable, but as you say, Jean, we've got to be real to teach each other the lessons that are in these things that we go through. And we'd be pretending to be asleep, but he was lying awake worrying, and I was lying awake worrying, but we didn't want to worry each other. So we realized when we got through that and were able not to cast blame on each other, and we went to any strengths we had to build everything back up again. I decided we were never building from the ground up again. We would go to less, we became less risk averse after that, which was good for ourselves, our family, our business also. So both personally and in my relationship and in my business, I walked through the fire and came out with some lessons that made me and us even stronger afterwards.
Oh, that is so, and listen, there was a lot of marriages that did not make it through 2007, 2008 for that exact reason, right?
Absolutely.
And doesn't that seem so long ago? I mean, that just seems like almost a lifetime ago, 2007 and 2008. I can remember walking through the malls and there's just empty store after empty store after empty store. And it was devastating for a lot of people, right? So thank you for
It was a before and after. Those, and actually it was 7. You're right. It was 7, 8, and 9, and those were. I think of my life now as before those 3 years and afterwards. I used to think of my life as like before Tom, because we got together in 2000 with the new millennium, and then we had our boys and our marriage, and I used to think of my life, the 1900s, and then from the 20s I had this whole new world. So I used to think that was what divided my life into before and after. And then it came those 3 hard years, and now I think of my life as before those 3 years and afterwards. And for many people, Jean, COVID did that too. We just happened to, my husband and I happened to not be in the areas of business deeply affected by COVID, but many people were. Their business was that rug was pulled out from under them overnight. So I understood so deeply what they were going through. And also, and Jean, this is what you did. You created a space when everybody was afraid of what was happening to their businesses with your strategy sphere back in 2020, when that big world event was happening, to help people see that there was a way through. So there is always a way through if we can hang on to what's important, pivot, and then turn whatever the situation is to our advantage. Make, to use an old cliche, make lemonade from the lemons, right?
Well, you don't know it, but I'm going to do a little commercial here because you just set it up so beautifully. So just everything you just said. So we're going to take like a 10-second commercial and talk about our sponsor today, which is the Turnaround Conference, right? It's about creating a sustainable business in a less than desirable economy. And this is exactly what you were talking about, Eileen, turning things around. And this is the biggest Midwest business growth conference in the United States right now, in the Midwest. So I'd love to have you guys check it out, turnaroundconference.com. And back to our lovely guest here today, which is Eileen Walsh, Kerlin Walsh. So Eileen, Now going forward there, in after you started to kind of pick yourselves up and dust yourselves off, right? You guys were heavily invested into real estate. Did you
Absolutely.
jump back into that?
No, I do think one of the biggest lessons that we took from it was that we had to be less risk adverse.
Mhm,
So my husband built subdivisions, he built new homes.
mhm.
That was wonderful when we had a list of people wanting to buy them. So then what he does now is second story additions and, going out the back. He has a really nice business, but it is not risky. We don't have to worry when something's finished, where a buyer is going to come from. And that has been wonderful for us. And estate planning has been so robust, and it's actually a more lucrative profession, area of practice than real estate anyhow. So we were both able to find a more stable area of practice, and then that was just better for our family and for our foundation and for our future.
I love that. Of which I am a very happy client, right? Of your estate
Absolutely.
planning practice, which I could not be happier, just to give me that peace of mind, right? And I'm sure that's what you do with most people. There's a sense of what do they oh, I can't wait to get into the storytelling. I don't know where to go next, right? There's so many things I want to
So why don't I explain for our listeners, Jean, what I do, what
okay.
estate planning is. So estate planning is wills, trusts, powers of attorney, end of life instructions. It is taking care of your affairs. It's having the responsibility to think, what if I become less well? What if any of my family becomes less well? What if the accident, the illness occurs? Who is going to be in charge, and how are our assets going to be protected? How is everyone going to get taken care of? And as you said there, now you have peace of mind. If I have one person in my office when they have all their estate planning done, everything's lined up with their assets, if I've heard one person say, I just feel so relieved, or
Yeah,
that takes
really.
such a weight off my shoulders. It's hundreds, it's thousands. So it's just such a beautiful area of practice. And I know you will have heard me say this before, Jean, but I think what defines my area of practice and me as an attorney is summed up in an article I read one time about lawyers being divided into warriors and healers. And early in my practice, you read my bio. I did work for the public defender's office. I was a defense attorney. I tried cases, and it's an exciting area of law. It's fun. It's great cocktail story, party stories. But that was warrior law, and to win, someone had to lose, and to do a good cross examination, you truly had to eviscerate. You had to make your witness not look credible. So that law never sat really well with me. And then when I did discover estate planning, I loved it because we were helping people. We were giving people peace of mind. Everybody could win. And that's why I now define myself as a healer, not a warrior. And that's exactly what estate planning is. It's the healing law.
I love that because I believe every business partnership or when you're working together should be a win-win for everyone, right? Everyone involved. So I love
Absolutely.
the fact that you do that. What advice would you give um, a woman in her 40s or 50s who, and I know I'm kind of pivoting here, but what
Mhm.
advice would you give a woman in her 40s or 50s who's kind of heading into that second act of her life and doesn't know what to do as far as her business, or should she have a business?
Ah, boy, Jean. So I would say no matter what stage you're at, stay driven. If you have drive, if you have that, inner candle burning, whether it's maybe you're ready to retire, maybe you have your retirement funds together, but cultivate your own garden. So there has to be something in your life that you're still excited about. You can still bounce out of bed to work on, that you can still get together with like-minded people. So if it's your business, stay driven. Steve Jobs said, stay hungry. I would say stay driven, find your drive, find that purpose, find that thing that you're just just quiver with excitement to be part of. And I think that's what makes very successful retirements. It's what makes more successful business owners. I think it makes us more interesting as people. I think it's good for our relationships if we cultivate our own garden, find something that brings us joy and passion and interest, something that we can spend our time in, and something that we can bring, to a conversation, to a party, to your after dinner conversation. So I think to stay deeply interested in something and advance that interest and share that interest is where you can stay passionate to 99 years of age and beyond.
Well, we're a little over time, but I hope can you stay a little bit longer?
Absolutely, because
Okay.
I heard you mention storytelling.
Yes, and I was not going to let you go without getting into that, right?
Yeah.
So you created a program that I watched, and it is like the best thing I've ever seen. So would you tell people about that and
Yeah.
share that with all of us?
Absolutely, absolutely, Jean. So, estate planning is a very intimate, sensitive, vulnerable area of practice. I have to find out so much about people, their lives, their children that are not doing so well. We have to talk about vulnerabilities. We have to talk about illness. I I have to ask people a lot of intimate questions, and they tell me about their lives. And oftentimes, people's needs are wrapped in story. So I would grew up in storytelling, Jean. As you can tell from my voice, I grew up in Ireland, and as you mentioned in the bio, so it sounds like this is 100 years ago, but it's really only 50. But we didn't have electricity, and we were way in the country, and there was the 12 of us, and my parents and an elderly aunt, and we had turf fires and stories and neighbors and my grandfather. It really was a time when people entertained each other, and story was a huge part of my culture and my upbringing. So I gravitated towards it, and I loved when my clients would tell me their story. I encouraged them to talk to me about where they come from and what their life had meant and their meaning and their purpose and the difficult things they grew through, and how they stood up in their shoes. So when we would get the estate plan done, because of course those stories didn't belong in the documents, we would have these beautiful documents. We'd have the money, the home, the farm, everything beautifully set up to go to the children, the grandchildren. But what about those stories? They just got set on the shelf and they didn't get passed on. And I made it my mission to find a way for those to get passed on as part of the legacy. So I took this ancient tradition of an ethical will and made it very modern. And it's now called a legacy letter. I have a program called Share My Legacy, where I teach my clients, my audiences, my friends, my family to write just a little 15, 20-page story about their life, the lessons they've learned, how they would want to be remembered, what they're most proud of, the pearls of wisdom, their hopes, their blessings, and pass it on to those coming after. And I will tell you, Jean, as a businesswoman, when my clients see that I care about them and their stories beyond the legal documents, beyond the fees, they become my loyal clients and friends for life. So that is what distinguishes my practice and something I'm terribly proud of. And I know that element I will never let down. So I do have a big future plan. I do have a 10-year plan. There will be a time when I may not practice, but I just can see myself like Peace Pilgrim, who used to walk in white clothing all over the US with her stories of faith. I can just see myself always encouraging people, even in the retirement home, to write their story. So it's sort of I feel that maybe helping others leave their legacy is part of mine.
It is such a beautiful program, right? And I know that you are a big scrapbooker, right? And it kind of flows
Yeah,
right along with
it
archiving
does.
your memories of your family. It's not just the photographic memories that we need to be able to see that we have in the next 20 or 30 or 40 years, right? Or that our children have, but those stories that they won't remember, right?
Absolutely.
I just love this so much, Eileen. You know I do.
Yeah,
So,
I know.
before we leave, I know that you put something together for our audience, and I'm so grateful because I looked to see what it was, and it's pretty robust for free, by the way.
It is. It is. So it's the healthcare legal first aid kit. So people often come to me, Jean, for their estate planning, and they're thinking about taking care of their family after they die. It's very much about how are things going to get to the children. And I say, well, hey, we want to take care of you while you're still here first. So I am giving to your listeners, your viewers, a first aid kit, and it's a healthcare power of attorney, a healthcare living will, as well as a HIPAA release. And in order to the information that I've supplies to Eugene, they just need to click on it, give me a little bit of information, and as long as they're in the state of Illinois, we will draft these legal documents for you.
If you don't have a will, right? If you don't have a living will and a power of attorney, oh my gosh, I can't even imagine that. Listen, when my husband got sick and we didn't have a will, right? And he had pretty severe cancer, I cannot tell you, I literally wanted to cry when we got that done because it made me feel a little bit better about whatever might happen. Right.
Yes.
So you guys, so here it is, bit.ly/KWL, Kerlin Walsh Law. That's what it stands for. KWL First Aid Kit. So if you write that down, and I'll drop it into the comments later on for you. And now let me stop sharing this. Let's see there. We'll go back. Oh, there we are, back there. And take advantage of that. Eileen would not offer that for free if she did not want you to have it.
Yeah.
Right? We all need that stuff. So you always have, my favorite thing about the Share My Legacy program was in the videos, the beautiful book that you had with the beautiful scripts of quotes. Oh my gosh, like I could spend hours looking through that book. So I know you always have a quote or a poem or a message.
Yes.
You have one that you can share today?
Yes. One of my favorite quotes is from Mother Teresa, and I do try to exercise this in my home and with my family, with my clients, and it is spread love everywhere you go. Don't let anyone ever leave your company not more happy than when they entered into it.
Oh, I love that. Thank you so much. Thanks so much for being here. Thank you for sharing your milk crate moment for other people to understand that we can always come back from whatever, right? There's always a way out of it. So I love that. Eileen, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you so much.
Thank you. And I, Eugene. Thank you very much. God bless. Bye-bye.